humans abruptly walk away from the ancient galactic forum, defying centuries of tradition and sending every cosmic race into a panic. Their departure seems like another primitive stunt until the universe realizes humanity has rallied dangerously powerful allies. Forum bureaucrats recall old crises and distant planets, all quietly rescued by humans working wonders outside official channels. Deadlocked negotiations push one stubborn officer to witness humanity's heretical methods firsthand. At a lunar base where a bar takes the place of a boardroom and coffee replaces endless protocol, everything runs faster than any committee could. When catastrophe strikes, humans act immediately instead of forming endless task forces, exposing the forum's aging methods. Senior delegates dismiss it all until new anomalies and conflicts start piling up faster than the old rules can handle. Under dire conditions, so-called renegades save entire worlds faster than those delivering formal speeches. The result is clear. The galaxy splits between those craving change and those clinging to archaic regulations. The disillusioned officer vows to do the impossible, forging a future free from constant red tape. Stay with us if you want to know how the story ends, and don't forget to subscribe. Section 1. From the moment I arrived on the Conclave Citadel, I sensed the quiet hum of a bureaucracy older than half the stars in the spiral arm. Polished corridors curved through the structure in smooth arcs, lit by gentle, programmable luminescent strips. Guards in ceremonial armor stood at intervals, each wearing a metallic sash that denoted their species' status within the council. They observed every passerby with impassive faces. Protocol demanded that no one betray any emotion in these halls. I had seen starships from 100 civilizations moored in the docking spires outside, or frigates with hulls of living coral, merchant clippers whose sails were woven from cosmic silk, and battered exploration vessels that had soared beyond known frontiers. All had come here for the same reason. The agenda on the council's docket was rumored to address the rise of a radical movement calling itself the Kelsorian Dawn, which was said to flout every interstellar regulation that had held the galaxy together for centuries. People whispered about stolen resonator technologies, unauthorized colony expansions, entire worlds turning away from the council's authority. The bureaucrats, weighed down by tradition, had reacted slowly. Now, the wave of disruption threatened to wash away the old order entirely. I was summoned to witness it firsthand. An impartial observer, they claimed. My home star system existed on the fringes, too unimportant to hold a permanent seat on the council. Still, we had enough trade ties and historical relationships that the council recognized our officials as neutral participants. My official title was mediator at large, but that meant very little among species who had been forging alliances and revoking them for 1,000 generations. Only the unspoken acknowledgement that my people had no significant power made me useful. Impartial, non-threatening. I wove my way through the marble-clad corridors toward the central hearing chamber. The interior shimmered with elaborate mosaics that told the story of the council's founding, a time when savage wars threatened to break every inhabited planet. A coalition of ancient starfaring species had come together to codify universal guidelines, rules that guaranteed stability. Over millennia, new members were integrated, often after protracted negotiations. The council, in its current form, had over 8,000 subcommittees, each controlling an aspect of trade, resource distribution, frontier expansion, or conflict mediation. A gargantuan clockwork of procedures that squeaked and groaned, but still managed to keep the galaxy from fracturing into endless strife. Or so it was said. The new wave of rebellious outposts, rogue traders, and fervent ideological blocs argued that the council had become a fossilized monolith. They refused to abide by decrees they viewed as archaic. Some even said they had solutions for resource shortages, planetary disasters, or scientific leaps, if only the council would not bury every proposal under centuries of deliberation. As I reached the main hall's entrance, I heard a hush fall across the assembled delegates. Circular balconies rose in tiers above a polished central floor, each rung allocated to delegations from specific species or alliances. Up in the highest galleries were observers and neutrals, my place, presumably. But before I could ascend, my personal communicator chimed softly. A request for private counsel from the Zealand Directorate. Surprising. The Zealands rarely approached outsiders. Their rank within the council placed them in near-perpetual adjacency to the highest echelons of power. I found the Zealand representative, High Deputy Soren Dahl, near an ornate colonnade that overlooked the capital city skyline. She wore the loose-fitting cloak typical of Zealand statespersons, embroidered with elaborate fractal patterns. White hair spilled over her shoulders in braided loops. She beckoned me closer with an air of conspiratorial urgency. You're here to watch the negotiations about the Kelsorian Dawn, she said in a low voice. But there's more at stake. Some of us suspect that the Council's inaction is deliberate. There's fear that if they truly engage the radical movements, it could unravel the entire bureaucratic structure. I had heard rumors like that. The Kelsorian Dawn was only the most visible symptom of a deeper rot. And what do you want from me, High Deputy? She gave the faintest smile. We need a fresh perspective. The Council leadership, these ancient species with their revered seats, are terrified. They prefer to label the Kelsorian Dawn as rogue criminals. But those so-called rogues may have discovered technology or resources that could help millions of colonists on the brink of famine. They've apparently established quick-action relief programs, circumventing decades of Council red tape. If the public sees them solving crises in half the time the Council can manage, support for the old system will wane even further. I exhaled. So, the Council fears that if the radicals succeed, no one will respect its authority? Soren Dahl nodded. Precisely. If you glean any insight, if you see a path for reconciliation, share it with me. Because if the Council stalls again, the Kelsorian Dawn won't be the only uprising. My sources say entire border sectors are already on the verge of defecting. The galaxy could break into dozens of splinter alliances. I felt a chill. The Council had always been slow, but it was also stable. Unraveling it might lead to chaotic balkanization. Or perhaps something new might emerge, a more dynamic order. I wasn't sure which possibility unsettled me more. Moments later, the hearing began. Delegates filed into the central floor, each presenting formal greetings and reciting passages from the Council's massive compendium of etiquette. The lead moderator, a venerable Averick with glistening black eyes, droned through the introduction. My seat in the upper gallery provided a sweeping view of the assembly, row upon row of dignitaries, many of them wearing expressions of mild boredom. This, I realized, was a microcosm of the entire problem. The biggest threat in living memory was stirring out there in the galaxy, and the reaction was polite ceremony. Finally, the official speaker for the Kelsorian Dawn was allowed to speak. She was a lean, sharp-eyed woman with short-cropped hair and a band of silver around her temple, an off-worlder named Captain Irisakov. Her voice carried across the chamber with surprising resonance. You accuse us of defying the Council, she said, but the truth is that the Council has defied the needs of the galaxy. My people were starving. Your subcommittees took decades to authorize shipments of surplus. So we found our own solutions. We discovered caches of dormant resonator units, remnants of a civilization that once harnessed energy from subspace folds. With them, we restored farmland on 5 devastated planets. We built microjump relays for delivering emergency supplies. We rescued entire worlds from famine while you debated the definition of emergency dispatch protocol for half a century. A rumble of discontent spread through the floor. Some delegates looked aghast, while others wore expressions of grudging respect. At a raised podium, the Council's chief archivist demanded proof. Koff simply held up a data crystal. Everything we did is recorded here. We invite you to see for yourselves. And if you truly believe we're criminals, then come arrest us in the outer systems. I guarantee you'll find 1,000 worlds that will stand in our defense. This boldness rattled many. Whispering escalated. The Averick moderator hammered his staff on the floor. We must suspend the session to review this data and consult the relevant committees. At that, Captain Cobb let out a short, humorless laugh. By the time your committees finish, entire star clusters might fall to resource collapse. But do as you must. The Kelsorian Dawn will continue to act. The hearing adjourned, leaving the entire chamber simmering. Delegates hurried off to their private caucuses. I lingered near a side passage, watching Captain Cobb vanish through a doorway, flanked by a small guard of fellow rebels. Part of me wanted to follow, to glean more of the truth. Another part reminded me of my official role, neutrality. But Soren Dahl's words echoed in my mind. We need a fresh perspective. Section 2. The corridors emptied as delegates dispersed. Only scattered aides and protocol droids remained, bustling about with digital tablets, summarizing the day's events for their superiors. I found myself drifting toward the lower-level docking bays, compelled by an urge to see if Captain Kov might be accessible. A braver person might have approached her in the main hall, but I was a newcomer here, untested in council politics. Security officers, wearing the unmistakable emerald uniforms of the council's enforcement branch, paced around the bay entrances. Officially, the Kelsorian Dawn was not yet declared outlawed, so Kov and her retinue moved with cautious impunity. I glimpsed them near a sleek vessel, shaped like a hawk poised for flight. The hull bristled with modifications, extra thrusters, energy nodes, some possibly resonator tech. One of Kov's companions spotted me. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with an expression that suggested he valued no-nonsense efficiency above all else. Yet, instead of chasing me off, he studied my approach, perhaps sensing I posed no immediate threat. I need a moment with Captain Kov, I said, voice steady. I'm not with the council. I mean, not officially, well, I'm a neutral observer. He eyed me suspiciously. But then Kov's voice cut in from behind him. Let her through. She stepped forward, arms folded, hair glinting under the bay's overhead lights. A neutral observer. That's interesting. They keep neutrals as pets now? I flushed. I represent a star system that does minimal trade with the Council. We have associate status, nothing more. I was asked to watch these proceedings. You were impressive in there. Cobb's eyes were sharp as glass. Impressive or incendiary? Both, I suppose, I admitted. But if what you say is true, that you're using these resonator units to save entire systems, why not cooperate with the Council? She scoffed. We tried. Years ago, we filed petitions for emergency resource shipments. Our home sector was dying. Crops failing from solar flares, local governments bankrupt. The Council responded with centuries-old guidelines. We had no time for that. We found resonators in an abandoned star forge. We tested them, saw their potential. The Council demanded we halt, form committees, wait for approval. Meanwhile, people starved. So we chose another route. That route had turned them into a political phenomenon. Stories had spread about the Kelsorian Dawn's rapid interventions. Some claimed they bypassed standard hyperlanes, bridging them with short-range subspace tunnels. Others said they overcame entire quarantines to deliver vaccines during a plague outbreak. The Council called such feats reckless and unregulated. I asked, aren't you concerned about the dangers of these resonators? They date back to a civilization that vanished mysteriously. There might be reasons they were hidden away. Of course it's dangerous, Kov said softly. But so is letting entire planets rot while we wait for bureaucrats to sign off. We're not fools. We have scientists, engineers, many of them ex-council members who got fed up with the red tape. Her logic was uncomfortably compelling. I had grown up believing that the Council, with all its committees, was the pinnacle of civility, slow but sure. But hearing these stories, it felt like those committees might be less about caution and more about preserving certain power structures. Kov glanced at me, reading my hesitation. You want to see for yourself? Come with us on a run. We're about to depart for the Rearden Belt. Another colony on the brink of collapse. Council relief won't arrive for at least a decade. We plan to deliver enough resonator-charged agropods to sustain them through a harsh winter cycle. I froze. If I go, I'd be seen as collaborating with rebels. She laughed, not unkindly. We're only rebels because the Council says so. Look around. The law hasn't declared us criminals, yet. Besides, you're a neutral observer. Might as well observe the truth on the ground. A warm wind from the bay doors ruffled my hair, carrying the faint tang of starship fuel. Something in me recognized that crossing this threshold meant more than a simple data-gathering expedition. I'd be aligning with people who openly challenged the galaxy's mightiest institution. But I was also curious, desperate, even, to see if these tales of swift humanitarian action were real. Before I could talk myself out of it, I nodded. Kov signaled to her crew, who hurried to prepare for launch. Over the next 10 minutes, I found myself strapped into a seat aboard the sleek craft. The instrument panels glowed with unfamiliar readouts, presumably integrated from those old resonators. The engine hum was deeper than standard hyperdrive vessels, like subspace was thrumming all around us. We lifted off in a smooth arc, departing the conclave citadel's atmosphere. The security officers saw us go, but made no move to stop us. Either they had no grounds to do so, or they thought letting Kov depart was safer than confronting her inside the citadel. From my vantage, I caught one final glimpse of the elaborate spires of the Council complex, lit by the golden sunset. Was it a sign of the old ways crumbling? Kov's pilot engaged the drive, and the vessel shot forward with startling acceleration. My chest pressed into the seat harness. The shimmering swirl of subspace enveloped us. A typical jump might take hours or days, depending on the route, but this technology evidently shaved corners off the standard path. I gripped the armrest, half in awe, half in fear. If we collapsed in the depths of subspace, not even the Council's famed rescue ships could find us. Yet Kov appeared entirely at ease, leaning over a console to coordinate with her co-pilot. Power stable, tuning to the next node in the resonator chain. Our exit point is the Rearden Belt's outskirts, near the planet Vinshaw 4. An hour of tense silence passed, tense for me, at least. The crew maintained a relaxed, practiced routine. They had done this many times. I recalled the stories of entire star systems that revered these Kelsorian crews as miracle workers. Perhaps it wasn't hyperbole. We emerged from subspace above a dusty orange planet ringed by a wide asteroid belt. Pings from the local comm network revealed minimal orbital infrastructure, mostly small cargo platforms. Kov wasted no time. We've got a re-entry corridor prepared. The settlement's main dome is failing. They won't last through the next solar flare spike. A flurry of activity followed. The cargo hold readied crates full of agropods that could be deployed on the planet's surface. I glimpsed modular pods that apparently used miniature resonators to regulate moisture and temperature. like self-contained biospheres. If these work, they could sustain entire families for months at a time, perhaps even regreen certain wastelands. We descended into the atmosphere, battered by turbulent winds. Dust storms raged across the desert, swirling in ochre columns. The settlement was a cluster of half-collapsed domes connected by tunnels. The main structure still held. Barely. Kov gave swift orders. 3 teams fanned out. One stabilizing the dome with a resonator-based scaffolding system, another distributing agropods to starving families, and the last ensuring the settlement's generator didn't fail. I disembarked in a swirl of dust, covering my mouth with a breathing mask. The sight around me was grim. Children with hollow eyes, adults wearing patched suits with leaking seals. They stared at Kov's crew like they'd seen legends descend from the sky. Helpers guided them to the newly deployed pods, explaining how to cultivate algae-based protein with minimal water usage. The colonists' gratitude was tangible, emanating from relieved sobs and hushed prayers. No council bureaucracy in sight. No reams of paperwork. Just immediate relief, delivered by a group deemed rebels. My heart lurched at the thought of all the committees that would have debated this action for years. Kov's actions were direct, borderline reckless, but undeniably effective. Within hours, the dome's structural integrity improved. The air filtration system was supplemented by the resonator lattice that kept external dust from clogging vents. The colonists could survive long enough to plan for a more permanent fix. Some of the local leaders insisted on broadcasting their thanks to the entire sector, praising the Kelsorian Dawn for saving them. I saw Kov accept their gratitude with a look of pride, but also sadness. Perhaps she was keenly aware that they couldn't solve every crisis. But they'd solve this one, at least for now. She found me at the edge of the settlement, watching the dusty horizon. "You've seen it with your own eyes," she said softly. "We're not trying to tear the galaxy apart. We're trying to patch it back together faster than the Council's glacial pace allows. Does that make us criminals in their eyes?" I shook my head slowly. "I don't know how the Council will classify it, but you're clearly saving lives." Kov nodded toward the battered domes. "We have no illusions. Our approach is messy. Sometimes we fail. Sometimes the resonator tech does unexpected things. But the alternative, Council committees, indefinite delays, would have left these people to die. I can't call that acceptable." An uneasy hush settled over us. I knew how the Council would react to these unlicensed uses of ancient technology. They'd claim risk, but also they might fear losing their monopoly on slow, centralized solutions. The Kelsorian Dawn challenged their entire worldview. As the rescue operation wound down, the pilot signaled that we had only a short window before the next solar flare spike made conditions hazardous. The colonists would manage with the newly fortified dome. They weren't out of danger forever, but they had a fighting chance. Returning to the ship, I wondered what my role truly was. The Council had placed me as a spectator, yet I felt pulled to do more. Could there be a middle path that harnessed the Kelsorian Dawn's speed while retaining the Council's stability? Right now, that seemed wishful thinking. But perhaps that was the path Sorendal had hinted at. Or perhaps the entire galaxy was hurtling toward a conflict of old laws versus new urgency. Section 3. Our subspace trip back to the Conclave Citadel was not immediate. Kov and her crew had other errands to run. Last-minute supply runs, rescue calls from drifting vessels whose signals they picked up along the way. I saw them address each emergency spontaneously, with minimal fuss. The coordination was ad hoc, guided by a sense of moral imperative rather than any official directive. It was inspiring, but it also revealed their limitation. They had no single unifying system for expansion or governance. This was purely tree-off. The galaxy was vast. What they managed to handle was just a fraction of the bigger crisis. Eventually, they dropped me off at a neutral starport so I could book passage back to the Citadel. Part of me hated to leave them. I felt I was witnessing a crucial historical shift, and the Kelsorian Dawn, despite being labeled outlaws, were on the leading edge. But I needed to return to deliver an unvarnished report of what I'd seen. I found the starport abuzz with rumors. Word of the Dawn's exploits had spread like wildfire, and not just about the rescue at HFY 4. Another faction in the Eastern Spiral Arm was rumored to have joined them, merging their resources to create a new supply route for neglected frontier colonies. The Council had thus far refrained from labeling them as an official threat, possibly because they feared igniting a wave of sympathy for these doers. Meanwhile, certain established species, themselves at the top of the Council's hierarchy, were rumored to be pressuring the legislature to clamp down. I boarded a standard commercial liner, the Celestial Turn, for the final leg. The interior was comfortable but Spartan. As we slipped into the recognized hyperlane that led back to the Citadel, I overheard various travelers discussing the latest news. Some praised the Kelsorian Dawn for their bravery. Others insisted the new movement was reckless, courting cosmic disaster with that old resonator tech. Despite the hum of conversation, I was lost in my own thoughts, trying to formulate how to approach the council. Telling them the truth that the Dawn was saving lives faster than any official process could provoke them to brand me an ally of insurgents. Yet if they refused to adapt, I feared a future in which entire star systems would rally behind the radicals, leaving the council's centuries of jurisprudence to crumble like dust. Upon arrival at the Citadel, I was greeted by an official courier from High Deputy Soren Dahl. She arranged a private meeting in her offices perched high in the conclave's southwestern tower. I climbed an intricate spiral ramp that overlooked the luminous cityscape below. The walls here were lined with ancient star maps, each representing a different era of council expansion. A silent testament to thousands of years of incremental progress. When Dahl entered, she wore the same embroidered cloak, her silver hair swept into a formal arrangement. But her expression was more urgent than before. "I trust your foray with the Kelsorian Dawn was educational?" I nodded, selecting my words carefully. "They're not mere agitators. They have real solutions, especially for resource crises. I saw them revive a colony that the council had effectively abandoned." She sighed. "And that's exactly what many of us suspected. They're providing immediate remedies where the council offers endless debate. It's no wonder border worlds flock to them." Meanwhile, the council leadership holds closed-door sessions to determine a proper legal classification for the Dawn's activities. They might brand them a paramilitary organization, or an extremist sect, or who knows what. Is there no room for compromise? Some synergy that merges the council's stability with the Dawn's agility? I asked. Dahl's shoulders tensed. "We tried to propose something like that. A new emergency protocol that would sanction rapid actions under certain conditions. But the council is resistant. The older species see this as a threat to their centuries-old prerogatives. They fear losing control." She beckoned me to a small data console. Holograms flickered, revealing messages from various delegations. The Kelsorian Dawn has gained allies. You might hear references to the Frontier Accord. It's basically a loose alliance of Outer Rim systems who've grown tired of waiting for the Council's snail-paced reforms. If they formalize it, we could face a schism. The Council might attempt to reassert dominance by force. A civil conflict on a galactic scale. A chill ran down my spine. Could the Kelsorian Dawn stand against the Council's military might? Hard to say, Dahl admitted. The Council still has the advantage in sheer resources. But if the Dawn harnesses enough resonator technology, they could disrupt supply lines or bypass strategic choke points. And they'd have the moral high ground in many eyes because they're actively saving lives. She turned off the holograms, the room dimming. "You've seen them up close. Perhaps your testimony could sway some moderate factions, show them that the Kelsorian approach, while imperfect, is not pure lawlessness. We might push for an urgent motion to incorporate certain resonator projects under a new council sanction, turning them semi-official. That could prevent a total rupture." I exhaled slowly. "You expect me to speak before the council?" She nodded. "A special assembly convenes tomorrow. The council wants direct accounts of how the Dawn is operating. If you're honest, tell them about that colony in the Rearden Belt. Maybe enough delegates will realize we can't just label them criminals." Her eyes held a glimmer of hope, but I sensed the precariousness of the situation. Many delegates saw any ceding of authority as unacceptable. Still, I agreed to appear, aware that my words might accelerate or forestall a catastrophic galactic rift. The next day, the chamber was packed. The special assembly included delegates from nearly every corner of council space, plus tens of thousands more watching via live holocast. The tension was almost physical, like static electricity in the air. On one side, hawkish members demanded immediate condemnation of the Kelsorian Dawn. On the other, cautious or moderate delegates urged further investigation. When my turn came, I walked to the central dais, conscious of hundreds of eyes trained on me from rising tiers of seats. I recounted, in plain detail, what I had witnessed: the decaying dome on Vinshaw, 4, the agropods that saved an entire settlement from famine, the grateful families. I described the resonator-based scaffolding that stabilized the dome, the calm efficiency of the Dawn's teams. "And how," rumbled one imposing delegate with a serpent-like visage, "do you know that these repurposed resonators won't trigger a meltdown of subspace? Ancient civilizations were lost to that technology." I recalled how systematically Kov's crew had tested each device, how they used only small-scale applications. "I can't guarantee absolute safety," I admitted, "but their procedures appeared methodical, not reckless. They are mindful of the risks. More mindful, in fact, than I expected." A wave of murmurs. Another delegate, this one with shimmering green antennae, demanded, "So are you endorsing this extra-legal usage of ancient technology?" I took a breath. I'm describing what I saw. Immediate relief to a colony the council had effectively written off as too remote, too poor to prioritize. If the council had responded sooner, that's when uproar broke out. Some roared that I was siding with radicals. Others demanded the council address its own failings. The Avaric presiding over the session hammered a staff to restore order. In the confusion, I glimpsed Soren Dahl in the stands, her face taut with worry. A final question came from a representative of a modest outer system, whose voice trembled. If we asked the Kelsorian Dawn for help, because our world is suffering, would the council declare us traitors? No one answered. The hush that fell was more damning than any condemnation. The session ended in disarray. Section 4. Over the next few days, the Citadel was in turmoil. Factions coalesced and fractured at a dizzying pace. The hardliners demanded a formal ban on any collaboration with the Kelsorian Dawn. The reformists pushed for new emergency protocols akin to what Dahl had described. Meanwhile, an undercurrent of fear took hold. Whispers of entire council fleets being mobilized circulated through the rumor channels. I found respite in the Citadel's less-traveled corridors. My presence had become controversial. Some saw me as a naive traitor to the council's processes. Others praised me for shining light on the real suffering beyond the council's borders. Each night, I returned to my small lodging and tried to gather my thoughts, but sleep was elusive. The knowledge that a galaxy-wide conflict might erupt weighed on me like lead. On the fourth evening, I received a cryptic message directing me to a deserted observation deck near the Citadel's northern spire. Curious and a bit uneasy, I followed the instructions and arrived to find High Deputy Dahl waiting, alongside a figure in a hooded cloak that obscured their face. The only sound was the distant hum of ventilation systems, punctuating the starlit silence. "I'm sorry for the secrecy," Dahl said softly, "but we have an unexpected visitor." She gestured to the hooded person. "They traveled here incognito, using forged council credentials. They're from the Kelsorian Dawn." My pulse quickened. A liaison of some sort? Then the stranger pulled back the hood, revealing a Zindran female with metallic blue scales and large luminous eyes. She was younger than I expected, though her gaze held a glint of unwavering resolve. "My name is Sallow," she said in a hushed tone. "I serve on the Kelsorian Technical Council. Captain Cobb sent me. We risked infiltration because time is short. The resonator supply we rely on is nearly spent. We need official support to secure more without resorting to raids on ancient relic sites. We're on the brink of being overwhelmed by the demand for aid." Dahl's expression revealed shock. "So, the Kelsorian Dawn is running out of resources. The rumor was that you had discovered an endless stash." Sallow shook her head. "There's no endless stash. We found a few caches scattered in old star forges, but each resonates with specific subspace frequencies. Once they degrade, it's incredibly difficult to retune them without advanced knowledge that likely resides in the Council's restricted archives." I processed this carefully. "You're saying that if the Council would provide access to certain data, knowledge about subspace resonance, presumably, it could help you maintain your rescue operations?" "Exactly." The Zindran's eyes gleamed in the deck starlight. "But the Council's locked that research behind maximum security classification, claiming it's too dangerous. Meanwhile, we're forced to scavenge or forcibly open ancient vaults, which only escalates tensions." Dahl folded her arms. "If we could persuade the Council's archives to release even partial schematics, the Kelsorian Dawn might limit the risk of meltdown or miscalibration. But the old guard will say the knowledge must be safeguarded. They fear unleashing another cataclysmic event like the one that ended the civilization that originally built the resonators." Sallow's voice trembled with urgency. "We're not blind to those dangers. But we're already using the tech on a large scale, out of necessity. We can't just stop. The Council's data could help us do it more safely. And maybe that could be the start of bridging the gap." I exhaled slowly. "That's a bold proposition, to share top-tier classified data with the group the Council is on the verge of outlawing." She nodded, glancing nervously at Dahl. "But we have one piece of leverage. Many frontier systems now rely on the Kelsorian Dawn for survival. If we fail, entire star clusters will blame the Council for withholding solutions. The political cost might be catastrophic." Dahl gave me a look that spoke volumes. "We need to figure out how to pitch this to the Council fast." We decided on a plan. Dahl would discreetly approach the moderate factions, presenting the idea as a limited pilot program, release carefully redacted subspace resonance data, allow the Dawn to refine their usage, and in return, the Dawn would formalize certain safety guidelines, effectively acknowledging some Council oversight. It was a delicate dance, to offer the Council enough face-saving authority while letting the Dawn keep their speed and moral impetus. Over the next days, Dahl and I lobbied behind the scenes, meeting with delegates who seemed open to compromise. Some were outraged at the idea of sharing restricted knowledge with renegades. Others recognized the advantage. Better to co-opt the Dawn than fight a multi-front conflict. Diplomatic maneuvering in these ancient halls was as Byzantine as ever, but a small coalition of moderate voices coalesced around the plan. They arranged a closed-door summit for an official negotiation with the Kelsorian Dawn's representatives. Everything hinged on the Council's ability to trust that the Dawn wouldn't exploit the data for power grabs or inadvertently cause a subspace catastrophe. Meanwhile, the Dawn needed assurance that they wouldn't be strung along by endless bureaucracy. Within a week, the entire Citadel pulsed with anticipation. The closed-door summit was scheduled for the following morning. I tried to rest the night before, but my mind spun with potential catastrophes. If negotiations failed, the Council might declare martial law in the outer systems, igniting a rebellion on an unprecedented scale. Or the Dawn might reject the Council's conditions and intensify their covert expansions. The entire precarious edifice of galactic governance hung in the balance. Section 5. The morning of the summit arrived under a violet sunrise, the Citadel's spires gleaming in mirrored reflection. Only select individuals were granted entry to the secure conference chamber. Dahl, Sallow, 2 official archivists, and a handful of Council envoys representing moderate factions. The door slid shut, leaving me outside, pacing in a cavernous marble foyer lined with statues of the Council's founding members. Perhaps it was for the best. I was neither a lawmaker nor a renegade. My role was to bear witness. Hours crawled by with no word. The corridor remained deserted except for the occasional scribe scuttling through. Anxiety seeped into my bones. The tension felt tangible, as if the entire building were braced for a sudden jolt. At midday, Dahl emerged briefly to exchange documents, meeting me in the hallway with a whispered update. It's difficult, but they're talking. The archivists are terrified about unleashing data. The Dawn's negotiators are suspicious about partial oversight clauses. But there's still hope. She vanished back inside. More hours passed. My communicator beeped. Scattered rumors flew about clashes in distant star sectors, where local garrisons had tried to seize Dawn's ships. The Kelsorian outposts threatened retaliation. It was a reminder that while negotiations took place in this quiet chamber, the galaxy teetered on the edge of conflict. Finally, as the artificial lighting shifted to evening glow, the doors opened. Out strode Dahl, Sallow, and the others. The expressions were weary, but not hopeless. We retreated to a side lounge, where Dahl poured drinks for everyone, a centuries-old custom to mark the conclusion of major negotiations. Sallow rubbed her eyes, scanning the group. We've drafted a preliminary agreement. If ratified, the Council will release carefully curated subspace research to the Dawn, just enough to ensure safer resonator usage. In return, the Dawn will submit logs of major interventions to a newly formed Rapid Oversight Committee, allowing the Council to remain informed and set minimal safety parameters. Dahl nodded gravely. We insisted on disclaimers that the Council cannot bury urgent requests in red tape. This new committee must convene within days, not decades. It's a radical departure from the usual procedures. One of the archivists, a pale, slender being with elongated ears, spoke quietly. The Council's elder races might still block it. They hold a veto power on amendments that deal with restricted knowledge. We'll need a final vote in the Grand Assembly tomorrow. Sallow's gaze flickered with concern. If they block it, the Dawn can't accept indefinite delays. We'll proceed on our own, and that will mean the confrontation escalates. All eyes turned to me for some reason. I lifted my glass, the surface trembling slightly in my hand. Then we must hope the moderate factions muster enough support, because if this fails, the galaxy might break into open war. We parted ways soon after. Sallow had to deliver news to her people. Dahl needed to rally delegates. The next day loomed large, a vote that could shape galactic history. I scarcely slept that night, haunted by the memory of the Rearden Belt colony, the lines on those people's faces. They had found hope outside official channels. Would the Council adapt, or cling to old patterns? At the crack of dawn, I joined the throngs heading to the Grand Assembly Hall, a circular arena with tiered seating for thousands of delegates. The rostrum at the center was flanked by the Averick presiding council. The vote was item 3 on a massive docket, yet it overshadowed every other matter. The hush in the hall when the item was finally announced was near absolute. One by one, delegates took the floor, stating their positions. Hardliners thundered about preserving tradition, warning that resonator data could unleash cataclysm. Reformists cited the urgency of crises and the success of Dawn interventions. Some delegates from the outer systems pleaded for a chance to harness the new approach to legitimize the rapid relief measures. Others invoked the memory of ancient cataclysms. No one wanted to see billions perish if the resonators malfunctioned on a grand scale. Finally, the Averick moderator called for the official vote to be tallied across each representative block. The hall's overhead lights dimmed, and a holographic voting interface glowed. I could almost feel the entire galaxy holding its breath. Time slowed to a crawl. The first wave of tallies showed the moderate blocks supporting the measure, the hardliners firmly opposed. The tension soared as neutral delegations cast votes. Soren Dahl's group, which had brokered the compromise, tallied strong. Then, the elder species weighed in, some of them on the fence, others staunchly protective of old ways. When the final count flashed on the overhead display, the hall erupted in a cacophony of voices. The measure passed by less than a dozen votes. I exhaled so sharply I felt dizzy. Applause and angry shouts mingled in equal measure, but it was done. The council had agreed, if by the narrowest margin, to share restricted data in exchange for partial oversight of the Dawn's resonator usage. High Deputy Dahl rushed up to me, eyes bright. It's not perfect, but it's a step forward. They can't undo it easily. We have to formalize committees now. Only one or two, mind you, not the usual 1,000. She laughed breathlessly, as if her entire being was filled with adrenaline. Let's hope the Dawn sees this as genuine. They might not fully trust the council yet. Delegates began streaming from the hall, excitement or fury coloring their faces. This was a monumental shift. For the first time in centuries, the council had compromised with an insurgent group rather than simply condemning or ignoring them. I caught sight of a cluster of elder delegates, their expressions grim but resigned. They realized the galaxy had changed. Section 6. In the weeks that followed, the uneasy alliance took shape. A skeleton version of the new Rapid Oversight Committee convened in an annex off the Citadel's main building. It was a modest group, a handful of council specialists, a few Kelsorian Dawn engineers, including Sallow, and neutral liaisons to settle disputes quickly. Some predicted fiasco, convinced that the old guard would sabotage the committee or drown it in formalities. Others believed it would provide a blueprint for further reforms. I attended the inaugural meeting by special invitation, curious to see if they could avoid the bureaucratic traps of the past. The small conference room was cluttered with star charts, subspace diagrams, half-eaten trays of rations. Freed from typical council pomp, the participants engaged in direct conversation. They hammered out guidelines for safe resonator usage, a streamlined system for requesting relief efforts, and a data-sharing protocol that avoided red tape. Though progress was slow, it was progress. The Kelsorian Dawn now had a legal channel to gather crucial knowledge from ancient archives, refining their equipment to reduce meltdown risk. In return, they had to file quick post-action reports, letting the council track where interventions were happening. It was far from a perfect system. Some missions would still ignore these steps due to emergency constraints, and some council members continued to express distrust. But at least there was a framework for cooperation. Beyond the Citadel, the galaxy stirred with renewed optimism. Frontier communities heard rumors that, at last, the council might react faster to disasters or resource shortages. Cynics sneered that it was just more committees. Perhaps they were right in part, but from everything I witnessed, this was a new breed of committee, smaller, more focused, less tolerant of indefinite debate. High Deputy Dahl confided in me that the real test would come when the next crisis struck. If the new approach swiftly aided a crisis zone, it would validate the alliance. If it stumbled, the old guard would seize the chance to revert to tradition. Meanwhile, Sallow confided that some of the Kelsorian Dawn's hardcore elements resented any council involvement, fearing a slippery slope back into suffocating bureaucracy. They think we sold out, she said with a rueful smile, but without subspace data from the archives, we'd soon be powerless. So we had to take the leap. And me? I found myself straddling two worlds, the musty archives and marbled halls of the council, and the raw heroics of the Kelsorian Dawn. Both needed each other, whether they admitted it or not. In countless small ways, I assisted, bridging misunderstandings, clarifying what was procedure and what was tradition. My neutrality had become valuable, ironically making me no longer neutral at all. I was an active participant in forging a new path. Then, sure enough, a crisis loomed. Word arrived of a cataclysmic storm building in the Celian Sector's star cluster, threatening to irradiate 2 inhabited worlds. The Council's old committees would normally study the phenomenon for months. But the newly minted Rapid Oversight Committee declared an immediate alarm. The Kelsorian Dawn mobilized, preparing resonator shields that could deflect cosmic rays. The Council's logistic network, awakened from slumber, quickly authorized supply ships loaded with the necessary materials. For the first time, we saw both sides coordinate in real time, a unified rescue mission with full Council support behind the Dawn's agile methods. Reports filtered in, describing how the joint operation had stabilized planetary orbits, evacuated high-risk zones, and shielded vulnerable satellites. The cosmic storm hammered the sector, but the losses were minimal compared to earlier predictions. As success stories poured back, the entire Citadel buzzed with relief. Even some critics grudgingly admitted that the synergy had worked wonders. The news channels labeled it a turning point. Speculation soared that the Council might replicate this model for future crises. Yet no one believed the galaxy's problems were solved overnight. Ancient grudges, bureaucratic inertia, the sheer scale of star systems in need. It would take decades, if not centuries, to transform the Council fully. The Kelsorian Dawn remained wary, ready to operate outside official structures if the new method bogged down. But the fracturing of the galaxy had been postponed, maybe even averted. A fragile, tenuous alliance had taken root. I found my final moments in the Citadel bittersweet. High Deputy Dahl had asked me to stay on, to help shape the new wave of reforms, but something in me yearned to see how these changes truly played out across the stars. I wanted to visit those frontier worlds, see how local communities reacted to the Council's newfound willingness to expedite. I also wanted to check if the Kelsorian Dawn's rank-and-file members felt betrayed or hopeful about this partial integration. On my last day, Dahl walked me to the Citadel's main hangar. She wore a thoughtful expression. "You've done more for us than you realize. By speaking truth about what you saw, you made it impossible for the Council to ignore those dying on neglected worlds. You might have saved the entire institution from itself." I managed a small smile. "You give me too much credit." Many forces converged on this moment. I was just a pair of eyes, relaying facts. She shook her head. "Sometimes that's all it takes, to witness and speak up. Travel safely. If the galaxy continues to shift, I expect we'll meet again, perhaps in some corner of the spiral arm where the new synergy is tested." As I stepped onto my shuttle, I carried with me a sense of cautious optimism. The Council and the Kelsorian Dawn had reached an accord, imperfect, fragile, but also unprecedented. They had broken the tradition of immobility that had ruled for eons. Rapid action had found a place in the old order, and the old order had discovered that dogmatic caution could be lethal. In the distance, the Citadel's spires receded from view, their grandeur no longer feeling unassailable. I reflected on how, not long ago, I walked those corridors certain that centuries-old protocols were the galaxy's crowning achievement. Now, I saw that while tradition had value, it had needed a jolt of radical urgency to remain relevant. My shuttle angled upward, piercing the Citadel's atmospheric bubble, heading for open space. I gazed out a viewport at the star-flecked vastness. Countless societies thrived or struggled in that black ocean. Some would adapt to the new synergy of speed and oversight. Others might cling to old ways or push for more extreme autonomy. Conflict might still flare on the horizon. But for the moment, there was hope that bureaucratic stagnation and reckless renegades had found a tenuous bridge. Perhaps that was the galaxy's path forward. Not a sudden overthrow, but an evolutionary leap. Old and new, side by side, forging solutions to crises that dwarf the capacity of any single approach. I closed my eyes and allowed myself a moment of gratitude that I'd witnessed this shift at its inception. My communicator chimed with a message from one of Kov's officers, simply reading, "We're about to attempt a new subspace jump corridor in the Orson sector. Wish us luck." A grin tugged at my lips. Then I typed back, "The Council's Rapid Oversight Committee might be very curious. Send them the telemetry when you can." Because that was our new reality, a delicate collaboration where once there was only suspicion. And so I drifted onward, bound for new vantage points across the spiral arm, the story of the Council and the Kelsorian Dawn unfolding behind me. We had set something in motion, a single pivot in the great cosmic machinery. Whether it would endure or unravel remained uncertain. But in a universe teeming with life, longing for salvation, and weary of inertia, we had given birth to the possibility that both tradition and bold improvisation could coexist. As the stars blurred into lines with the ignition of the shuttle's next jump, I whispered a quiet thanks to the colonists who had shown me what was at stake, to the Council members who dared to question their own complacency, and to the Kelsorian Dawn for proving that immediate relief was sometimes the difference between life and death. The future beckoned, and for the first time in centuries, it was not weighed down by the suffocating drag of endless committee procedures. The gears of bureaucracy and the wheels of progress had begun to mesh at last.